The restaurant always felt loneliest after midnight. I moved through Bella Notte with my mop and bucket, humming under my breath while the overhead lights flickered their usual mechanical rhythm. Outside, rain hammered against the windows of Little Italy, turning the street into a river of neon reflections. Inside, the air still held the ghost of garlic and wine, mixed with the lemon disinfectant I'd been pushing across terracotta tiles for the past hour. My voice drifted through the empty dining room, a Sicilian lullaby my grandmother taught me when I was 7. Dormi, dormi, bel bambin. The melody was old, probably ancient, the kind of thing that existed in whispers between mothers and daughters in villages I'd never seen. I didn't notice the man in the corner booth until I was halfway through the second verse. He sat perfectly still in the shadows, one hand resting on the white tablecloth, the other hidden beneath the table. Dark suit, darker eyes, the kind of stillness that didn't feel peaceful, it felt predatory. My humming died in my throat. "I'm sorry," I said quickly, gripping the mop handle. "I didn't realize anyone was still here. Kitchen's closed, but I can. Keep singing." His voice was low, rough-edged, like gravel wrapped in silk. The kind of voice that made you forget what you'd been about to say. I blinked. What? The song. He leaned forward, and the dim light caught the sharp angles of his face. Strong jaw. A thin scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Eyes that looked like they'd seen things that would make most people stop sleeping. "Where did you learn it?" Something in his tone made my pulse skip. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Something that felt like recognition mixed with disbelief. "My nonna," I said carefully. "My grandmother. She used to sing it when I couldn't sleep." He stood up then, and I realized how tall he was. How he moved with the kind of control that suggested violence was always an option, just never the first one. He crossed the empty restaurant in 4 strides, stopping just close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, like smoke. "What was her name?" Why does it matter? What was her name? The repetition wasn't louder, but it hit harder. I took a half step back, my shoulders pressing against the dessert case. "Rosa Catalano," I whispered. "She died 3 years ago." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. He stared at me like I was a ghost he didn't want to believe in. "That song," he said quietly, "is not written down anywhere. It's not on any record or in any book. The only person who ever sang it to me was my wife." The air in the restaurant seemed to contract. "Your wife?" "She died 8 years ago." His hand moved to his jacket pocket, and I flinched instinctively. But he only pulled out a phone, scrolling through it with mechanical precision before turning the screen toward me. The photograph showed a young woman with dark hair and laughing eyes, holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. She wore a simple gold cross around her neck. Behind her, I could see olive trees and a stone villa that looked older than America itself. "Caterina," he said. The name sounded like prayer and curse wrapped together. That was her village song. Her mother's village song. From a town in Sicily that barely exists on maps anymore. My mouth went dry. "I don't understand." "Neither do I." He pocketed the phone, but his eyes never left my face. How does an American waitress know a song that only existed in one family, in one forgotten village, sung by a woman who died in my arms? I couldn't answer, couldn't think. My grandmother's face swam through my memory. Her gentle hands, her tired smile, the way she'd brush my hair while humming that exact melody. "I need to go," I said, hearing the tremor in my voice. "No." He didn't touch me, but the word was a wall. "You need to tell me everything about your grandmother. Where she was born. How she came here. What else she told you. I don't know you. I'm not telling you anything. My name is Dante Salvatore." He said it like it should mean something, like it was supposed to make me understand. "And as of 2 minutes ago, you became very interesting to some very dangerous people." The lights flickered again. Outside, a car slowed in front of the restaurant, black, expensive, windows tinted dark. It didn't stop, but it didn't need to. The message was clear. Dante's hand moved to the small of his back, and I saw the gun before he could hide it completely. "What did you just do?" I breathed. "I stayed too long." He moved toward the door, checked the street with the practiced ease of someone who expected violence. When he turned back, his expression had hardened into something unreadable. "That car is going to circle back. When it does, the men inside will have questions about why I'm here, about who you are, about what I heard you singing. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to." He pulled a card from his jacket, black, with only a phone number embossed in silver. "But you need to call me if anything strange happens." If anyone asks about your grandmother. If you see anyone watching you. I stared at the card like it might bite me. I'm not calling you. I'm going home and pretending this never happened. Something almost like sympathy crossed his face. It's too late for that, Bella. The moment you sang that song, you became part of something you can't walk away from. The black car appeared again at the end of the block, crawling forward like a shark. Dante's jaw tightened. Lock the door behind me. Don't go home tonight. Find a friend. Somewhere public. Somewhere crowded. You're insane. Maybe. He opened the door, rain and cold air flooding in. But I'm also the only reason you're still breathing. He disappeared into the storm, and the black car accelerated past without stopping. I stood alone in Bella Notte, holding a mop in one hand and a business card in the other. My grandmother's lullaby still echoing in my head like a promise I didn't understand. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text was brief. Don't go home. I mean it. DS. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, I started shaking. I didn't go home. Instead, I sat in a 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, nursing cold coffee and watching the door like it might explode. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. A drunk couple argued in the corner booth. A homeless man slept with his head on the counter. The waitress older, tired, wearing a name tag that said Dolores refilled my cup without asking. Normal. Everything was aggressively, violently normal, except for the black card burning a hole in my jacket pocket, except for the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled out my phone and typed Dante Salvatore into the search bar, then hesitated. What was I expecting to find? A LinkedIn profile? A Facebook page with family photos? I hit search anyway. The results loaded slowly, and my stomach dropped with each headline. Salvatore family maintains grip on Harbor District. Federal investigation into Salvatore Enterprises stalls again. Dante Salvatore, the ghost who runs the city. I clicked on an article from 2 years ago. The photograph showed him leaving a courthouse, surrounded by lawyers in expensive suits. Same hard jaw, same unreadable eyes. But in the photo, he looked even more dangerous, untouchable, in a way that suggested he'd never spent a single night worried about consequences. The article called him the Quiet King, said he'd taken over his father's organization at 28 after a violent coup that left 17 people dead, said he ran everything from shipping to real estate to things the article only hinted at with careful language, said he'd never been convicted of anything, despite decades of investigation, said his wife and infant son had died in a car accident 8 years ago, and he'd never been the same. I closed the browser and pressed my palms against my eyes. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. My grandmother was a sweet woman who made cannoli and watched game shows and died peacefully in her sleep. She wasn't connected to this. To men who carried guns and made people disappear, and my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're at Mel's Diner on 5th. Good choice. Public. Cameras. Stay there until sunrise. I nearly dropped the phone. My hands were shaking harder now as I typed back. How do you know where I am? The response came immediately. Because I'm keeping you alive. Someone's watching your apartment. I looked up at the diner windows, seeing only my own reflection staring back pale, frightened, young, 26 years old and completely out of my depth. Who? I typed. People who want to know why I stayed in that restaurant for 20 minutes. People who think you might be important to me. I'm not. The pause before his next message felt longer than it should have. Not yet. But they don't know that. I wanted to throw the phone across the diner, wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there frozen, while Dolores refilled my coffee again and gave me a look that said she'd seen too many scared girls in too many all-night diners to ask questions. Another message. Your grandmother, Rosa Catalano. She came to America in 1962. Is that right? My chest tightened. How do you know that? I have resources. Answer the question. Yes. She came over when she was 19, married my grandfather 2 years later. What village was she from? I tried to remember. My grandmother rarely talked about Sicily, always said she'd left that life behind for good reason. But there was one name I remembered from the few times she'd had too much wine at Christmas. San Salvatore di Fitalia. Why does it matter? This time, the pause was so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, because that's where my wife was from. And that village hasn't existed for 40 years. It was destroyed in a landslide in 1978. Everyone died or scattered. The coffee tasted like ash in my mouth. That's impossible. Yes, it should be. I stared at the phone, my grandmother's face swimming through my memory. Her careful hands, her quiet sadness, the way she'd sometimes look at old photographs and cry without explaining why. What did you run from, Nonna? What didn't you tell me? I need to see you, Dante typed. Tomorrow. Somewhere public. There are things you need to understand. I don't want to understand. I want my normal life back. That's not an option anymore. The cruelty of it, the simple, devastating truth made me want to scream. Why? I typed. And I hated how desperate the question felt. Why does any of this matter? Why do you care about some song? His response came slower this time, and I could feel the weight behind each word. Because my wife sang that song to our son every night. Because she told me it was the only thing her mother gave her before she died. Because it was supposed to die with Katerina. And now you're singing it like it's nothing. Like it didn't mean everything. I closed my eyes, feeling tears I didn't want to shed pressing against my eyelids. I'm sorry about your wife, I typed. But I can't help you. You already have. The diner door opened, and I looked up instinctively. Just a delivery driver, shaking rain off his jacket. But my heart was pounding anyway, seeing threats in every shadow. One more message appeared. Stay there until dawn. Then go to the address I'm sending you. Bring anything your grandmother left you. Letters, photos, anything. And if I don't, then you're on your own. And the people watching your apartment aren't the forgiving type. The address came through. Some building in the financial district. I sat in that diner until the sun came up, drinking bad coffee and watching strangers live their normal lives, wondering how mine had shattered so completely in the space of a single song. The building on Chambers Street didn't look like it belonged to a criminal. It was all glass and steel. The kind of place where hedge fund managers and corporate lawyers worked 60-hour weeks. The lobby had marble floors and a security desk with 2 guards who looked more like soldiers. When I gave them Dante's name, they didn't ask questions, just nodded and directed me to the private elevator. The ride to the 15th floor felt like ascending into another world. I'd stopped at my apartment first, despite his warnings. Quick in and out, grabbing the shoebox from my closet that held my grandmother's things. The hallway had been empty, no one watching. Maybe Dante was paranoid. Maybe this was all some elaborate. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that was too quiet, too pristine. A woman with silver hair and a black dress sat behind a curved desk. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Miss Reeves, Mr. Salvatore is expecting you. Through the double doors, I clutched the shoebox tighter and walked forward. The office beyond was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. Dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with books that actually looked red. And behind a desk that could have doubled as a small car, Dante sat reviewing documents with the same deadly focus I'd seen last night. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression shifted, tension releasing, then immediately rebuilding into something harder. You went home. It wasn't a question. I needed my grandmother's things. I told you not to. You don't get to tell me what to do. I set the shoebox on his desk with more force than necessary. I'm here. I brought what you asked for. Now explain why my life is falling apart. He studied me for a long moment, then stood and moved to the windows. Against the morning light, he looked different, less like a monster, more like a man carrying weight that would have crushed anyone else. My wife's name was Katerina Russo before we married, he said quietly. She came to New York when she was 16, alone. No family, no papers, no past she'd talk about. I met her when she was 19, working in a bakery in the Bronx. He paused, and I heard the ache beneath his controlled tone. She wouldn't tell me where she came from. Said it didn't matter. Said she was American now. But at night, when she thought I was asleep, she'd cry and sing that song. He turned to face me. When our son was born, she sang it to him every night. Made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd teach him that melody, that it was his birthright. The car accident, I whispered, remembering the article. His jaw tightened. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. My father had enemies who wanted to hurt him through me. They succeeded. The rawness in his voice made my throat close. I'm sorry, I managed. But I still don't understand what this has to do with me. Open the box. I hesitated, then lifted the lid. Inside, my grandmother's rosary, made of olive wood. A faded photograph of her as a young woman, standing in front of a stone church. A recipe card in her handwriting. And a small leather journal I'd never seen before. Dante's hand shot out, stopping just before touching the journal. Where did you find this? It was taped to the bottom of her jewelry box. I only found it when I was cleaning out her apartment after she died. I picked it up, feeling its weight. I never read it. It felt private. Open it. First page. My hands trembled as I did. The handwriting was my grandmother's, but younger, shakier. The date at the top made my breath catch. The 15th of May, 1962. I have to write this down before I forget her face. Before America makes me forget everything. Katerina was my sister. My twin. The beautiful one. The brave one. The one who should have lived. The words blurred. Keep reading, Dante said, his voice barely above a whisper. The landslide took everyone. Mama. Papa. The entire village buried in mud and rock. But Katerina and I, we weren't there. We'd gone to Palermo to sell olives. When we came back, there was nothing. Just silence and dirt and death. Katerina wanted to stay. Wanted to dig through the rubble, find survivors, rebuild. But I knew better. I knew the landslide wasn't natural. I'd heard the men talking in the market, the men with guns and cold eyes who said our village was in the way of progress. So I ran. I took the money we'd made from the olives and I ran to Naples, then to Rome, then to New York. I told Katerina to come with me, but she refused. Said she had to stay, had to honor the dead. I left my twin sister in Sicily, left her with nothing but that song our mother used to sing, and I've never forgiven myself. The journal fell from my hands. Dante picked it up, handling it like sacred text. Katerina Russo, he said. The name she took when she came to America 16 years after you grandmother did. She would have been 35 when I met her. My grandmother had a twin sister, I breathed. And you married her, which means you're her niece. The realization hit like a physical blow. I'm your dead wife's niece. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something other than control in his eyes. I saw grief so profound it had carved him hollow. That song was supposed to die with her, he said. But your grandmother kept it alive, passed it to you. And now, the office door burst open. A man in a dark suit, breathing hard. Sir, we have a problem. The Cosa brothers know she's here. Dante's expression went arctic. Lock down the building. He turned to me, and the man I'd seen by the window was gone, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous. You can't leave now, he said. Not safely. What does that mean? It means you're mine to protect. Whether you want to be or not. The conference room had no windows. Dante had moved us there within seconds, his hand on my lower back, firm and unyielding, guiding me through corridors that suddenly seemed filled with armed men who materialized from nowhere. They wore suits but carried guns openly, and they all looked at me like I was a problem they hadn't anticipated. Now I sat in a leather chair while Dante stood at the head of a long table, listening to a man named Marco explain why my presence in this building had apparently started a war. The Cosa brothers have eyes on every entrance, Marco said, pulling up security footage on a screen. They followed her from her apartment this morning. Waited until she was inside to make their move. I watched the grainy video of myself entering the building 2 hours ago, oblivious. Watched as 3 cars pulled up minutes later. Men emerging with the casual confidence of people who knew they were untouchable. They're not storming the building, Dante said, his voice eerily calm. That means they want to negotiate. Or they're waiting for her to leave so they can take her somewhere quieter. Another man added. He was older, graying at the temples, with a scar that ran from his ear to his collar. The girl's a complication, boss. We could. Finish that sentence and I'll remove your tongue. Dante didn't raise his voice, but the temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. She's under my protection. That's not negotiable. The older man held his gaze for a beat, then nodded. Understood. I found my voice, though it came out smaller than I wanted. Who are the Cosa brothers? Dante turned to me, and I saw him making a calculation how much truth I could handle, how much would break me. Rivals, he said finally. They've been trying to move into territory my family controls for the past 3 years. They're opportunists, violent, not particularly intelligent, but persistent. And they want me because? Because they think you matter to me. He said it simply, like it was obvious. They saw me in that restaurant, saw me stay longer than I should have, saw me react to something you said, and now they think taking you gives them leverage. But I don't matter to you. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. They don't know that. Marco cleared his throat. Sir, there's more. We ran the girl's background. Standard protocol. And there's something you need to see. He slid a folder across the table. Dante opened it, and I watched his expression carefully neutralize into nothing. What? I demanded. What did you find? He turned the folder toward me. Inside were documents, legal papers, immigration records, birth certificates. My grandmother's name appeared over and over, but there were other names too. Names I didn't recognize. Your grandmother didn't just run from Sicily, Dante said quietly. She testified. In 1965, she gave statements to federal investigators about the men who destroyed her village. Named names. Provided details about smuggling operations, protection rackets, political corruption. My stomach turned to ice. No, she wouldn't. She did. And 3 of the 5 men she named were high-ranking members of the Cosa family. He pointed to a faded photograph in the file, men in suits, standing outside a courthouse. 2 of them went to prison. 1 died there. The other was released 8 years ago and happens to be the father of the Cosa brothers currently surrounding this building. The room tilted. So this isn't about me singing some song, I whispered. This is about revenge. It's about both. Dante closed the folder. Your grandmother's testimony destroyed their family's reputation. Cost them money, power, respect. They've been looking for her for decades. And now you've appeared, connected to me, carrying her blood and her secrets. I don't have any secrets. I'm a waitress who— You're a Catalano, he interrupted, and the name sounded like a curse. Rosa Catalano's granddaughter, Caterina Russo's niece, and whether you like it or not, that blood makes you valuable. To me, to them, to anyone who understands what those women represented. I stood up, chair scraping against marble. This is insane. I'm not part of this world. I don't want to be part of it. You think I wanted this? His voice cut through the room like a blade. You think I wanted to walk into a restaurant and hear my dead wife's voice coming from a stranger? You think I wanted to discover that the only family she had left was working minimum wage in Little Italy, completely unaware that half the criminal underworld would kill to find her? The rawness in his tone stopped me cold. Caterina spent every day of her life hiding, he continued, quieter now. She never told me about Rosa, never mentioned having a twin who survived. She carried that loneliness until it killed her, and now you're here, singing that same song, wearing that same face. And I'll be damned if I let you die the same way. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Marco broke it carefully. The Cosa brothers want a meeting. Tonight. Neutral ground. They're asking for the girl in exchange for— No, sir. They're offering a full territorial concession. 5 blocks along the harbor. That's— No. Dante's hand slammed down on the table, and I flinched. Set up the meeting. But they're not getting her. They're getting an explanation of why touching her would be the last mistake they ever make. He looked at me then, and I saw something in his eyes that terrified me more than the guns or the threats or the men outside. I saw possession. You're staying here, he said, in this building, under guard, until I've handled this. You can't keep me prisoner. I'm not keeping you prisoner. His voice softened, and somehow that was worse. I'm keeping you alive. The door closed behind him with a finality that sounded like a cell door locking. The penthouse apartment was beautiful in the way expensive things are when no one actually lives in them. Marco had escorted me up 3 more floors after Dante left, his hand never straying far from the gun at his hip. He'd opened a door to reveal floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a kitchen that looked untouched, and a bedroom with sheets so white they seemed to glow. You'll be comfortable here, he'd said, though his tone suggested comfort wasn't really the point. 2 guards outside the door. Don't try to leave. That had been 4 hours ago. Now I stood at the window, watching the city stretch out below like a glittering prison, and tried not to think about how quickly my life had disintegrated. 48 hours ago, I'd been worried about making rent. Now I was locked in a mobster's apartment while he negotiated with people who wanted me dead over sins my grandmother committed before I was born. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course not. But the apartment had Wi-Fi, and my hands were shaking as I opened my messages. 12 texts from my roommate Jess. Where are you? You didn't come home. I'm freaking out. 3 missed calls from my manager at the restaurant. You were supposed to open this morning. Call me. 1 voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I pressed play, and a voice I'd never heard, smooth, amused, dangerous, filled the room. Hello, Miss Reeves. My name is Luca Cosa. I believe you're currently a guest of Mr. Salvatore, which puts us in an awkward position. I want you to know that my interest in you is purely professional. Your grandmother cost my family a great deal. I simply want the opportunity to discuss restitution. If Mr. Salvatore is being unreasonable about facilitating that conversation, I hope you'll consider reaching out. I'm not a monster. I'm a businessman. He left a number. The voicemail ended. My hands were shaking harder now. I'm not a monster. The words were delivered so smoothly, so reasonably, that they almost sounded true. Almost. The apartment door opened, and I spun around. Not Marco this time. A woman, maybe 40, carrying shopping bags. She had sharp eyes and moved with the same controlled grace I'd seen in all of Dante's people. Like violence was always an option, just never the obvious one. "Mr. Salvatore thought you might need clothes," she said, setting the bags on the counter. "And toiletries. Everything should fit. I don't want his gifts. They're not gifts. They're necessities." She pulled out a simple black dress, jeans, a sweater. "He'll be back by 9. He asked that you have dinner ready." I laughed sharp, bitter. "Excuse me? The kitchen is fully stocked. He prefers simple food, pasta, vegetables. Nothing too heavy. I'm not his cook." The woman's expression didn't change. "No, you're his responsibility. And right now the safest thing you can do is give him a reason to keep you comfortable rather than simply contained." She left before I could respond. I stood there, surrounded by expensive clothes and implicit threats, and felt something crack open inside me. Not fear anymore. Something sharper. Anger. I opened the shopping bags with violent efficiency. Found the clothes all in my size, all carefully chosen. Found the toiletries. Found, at the bottom of the last bag, a small box wrapped in brown paper. Inside was my grandmother's journal, a note in Dante's handwriting. "Read the rest. You need to understand what she was protecting you from." My hands trembled as I opened to the second entry. The 3rd of June, 1962. "I spoke to Caterina today. Called the only number I had for the village priest, and he tracked her down. She's still in Sicily, still alone, still singing that song to ghosts. She told me she met a boy, a good boy," she said, "from a family with old money and older sins. She wouldn't tell me his name, just said he made her feel safe for the first time since the village died. I begged her to leave. Told her that the men who destroyed our home would come back, that Sicily was built on blood and silence, and she was neither bloody nor silent enough to survive it." She laughed, said love was worth the risk. I wonder if she'll still believe that when they kill her for knowing too much. The entry ended there. I flipped through more pages, scattered thoughts, recipes, prayers. Then, near the end, dated 3 months before my grandmother died. I saw his face on the news today. Dante Salvatore, standing outside a courthouse, untouchable in his expensive suit. He has Caterina's eyes, the same darkness, the same grief. I almost called him. Almost told him that his wife had a sister who loved her, who failed her, who ran away and let her face those monsters alone. But what would I say? That I'm sorry? That I think about her every day? That the song she sang to her son is the same song our mother sang to us in a village that doesn't exist anymore? Some secrets are too heavy to share. Some ghosts are better left alone. The door opened again, this time Dante, earlier than expected. He looked exhausted, his jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, blood on his knuckles. I held up the journal. "You read this?" "Yes. She knew about you. Knew you'd married her sister. I suspected." He moved to the bar, poured 2 fingers of whiskey. The song was too specific, too personal, but I could never prove it. And now, he downed the whiskey in one swallow. "Now I know that everything I thought I understood about my wife was a lie. That she had family who abandoned her. That she died alone because the people who should have protected her ran away instead. The accusation hung between us. My grandmother was 19, I said quietly. She was terrified. So was Caterina. But she stayed. And it killed her." His jaw tightened. "Yes, it did. We stood there, 2 strangers bound by blood and ghosts and a song that shouldn't exist. The meeting went badly," I said, seeing it in his posture. "The meeting went exactly as expected." He set down his glass. "They want you. I told them they couldn't have you. Now we wait to see who blinks first." I didn't cook him dinner. Instead, I sat on the leather couch with my grandmother's journal, reading entries that made my chest ache, while Dante made phone calls in Italian that sounded like quiet threats. Outside, the city lights blurred into constellations of gold and white. Around 10, he finally hung up and moved to the kitchen. I heard cabinets opening, the sound of water running, the metallic scrape of a pan against the stove. "You don't have to do that," I said without looking up. "Someone has to eat. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten since yesterday." He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Anger doesn't sustain you as well as you think it does. Neither does captivity." Something almost like amusement crossed his face. "You think you're a prisoner? I think I can't leave. That's the definition." He was quiet for a moment, then moved back into the kitchen. I heard the sound of chopping, quick, efficient, the rhythm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Despite myself, curiosity pulled me to the doorway. He stood at the counter, cutting vegetables with the same precise control he applied to everything else. No wasted movement. No hesitation. His sleeves were still rolled up, and I could see the blood on his knuckles more clearly now. Split skin. Bruising. Whose blood is that? The question came out before I could stop it. Mine. He didn't look up. Mostly. The Cosa brothers? One of them felt the need to make a point about respect. I felt the need to correct his understanding. He swept the vegetables into the pan, and the smell of garlic and olive oil filled the apartment. He'll recover. Eventually. I shouldn't have felt anything about that. Shouldn't have felt a dark satisfaction that someone who wanted to hurt me was now hurting instead. But I did. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. Really, it's not just about Katerina. His hand stilled over the stove. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, when she died, I made a promise to myself that I would never fail to protect someone again, that I would never let my own grief blind me to danger. He turned to face me, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. I failed my wife, failed my son, let them drive to her sister's apartment alone, because I had a meeting I thought was too important to miss. And while I was negotiating over shipping routes, someone put a bomb under her car. The rawness in his voice made my throat close. I heard the explosion from 3 blocks away, he continued. Ran the whole way, got there in time to watch the car burn, in time to hear nothing but silence. Dante, you have her face. The words came out broken. Not exactly, but enough. The same eyes. The same way of holding yourself when you're frightened but refusing to show it. And when I heard that song, he stopped, jaw working. I can't let you die too. The confession hung between us like smoke. I crossed the space without thinking, drawn by something I didn't understand. Stood close enough to smell cedar and smoke and the copper tang of blood, close enough to see the scar through his eyebrow, the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. I'm not her, I whispered. I know. I'm not yours to save. I know that too. His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed against my cheek so gently it felt like a question. But I'm going to anyway. The air between us felt charged, dangerous. His thumb traced my jawline, and I should have pulled away, should have maintained distance, should have remembered that this man was a killer who'd locked me in a golden cage. Instead, I leaned into his touch. This is a terrible idea, I breathed. Most of my ideas are. His other hand found my waist, and suddenly we were too close, breathing the same air. Tell me to stop. I should have. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to step back, to remember the guns and the blood, and the way he'd told me I couldn't leave. But there was something in his eyes, something wounded and desperate and achingly human that made me feel less alone. I can't, I whispered. He kissed me then, and it wasn't gentle. It was desperate, searching, like drowning and breathing at the same time. His hand tangled in my hair while mine gripped his shirt, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed warnings I refused to hear. He tasted like whiskey and regret. I tasted like surrender. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, and I felt him trembling, this dangerous man who controlled an empire, shaking like he'd forgotten how to be gentle. I shouldn't have done that, he said roughly. No, you shouldn't have. You should hate me. I probably will. I opened my eyes and found him staring at me with an intensity that made my pulse stutter. Tomorrow, when I can think clearly. Something almost like a smile touched his lips. Tomorrow. The smoke alarm went off shrill, violent. We broke apart as he swore in Italian and rushed to the stove, pulling the pan off the heat. The vegetables were charred black, beyond saving. He stared at them like they'd personally betrayed him. I laughed, couldn't help it. The sound bubbled up from somewhere broken inside me, and once it started, I couldn't stop. Laughed at the absurdity of it all, the mob boss who couldn't cook dinner, the kiss that shouldn't have happened, the fire alarm screaming while my life burned down around me. Dante looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Order pizza, I managed between gasps. If you're going to keep me prisoner, at least feed me properly. He stared at me for another beat. Then something shifted in his expression, tension releasing into something almost like warmth. Pepperoni? And mushrooms. Acceptable. He pulled out his phone, and I watched him order pizza with the same commanding tone he probably used to order executions. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Inside, I sat on his couch and wondered when captivity had started feeling like safety. The pizza arrived at 11, delivered by a nervous kid who wouldn't make eye contact with the armed guards. We ate in silence at first. Me curled on one end of the couch, Dante at the other, maintaining a careful distance that felt more fragile than safe. Your grandmother, he said finally, setting down his second slice. In the journal. She mentioned that the landslide wasn't natural, that she heard men talking. I nodded, pulling my knees to my chest. She thought it was deliberate, that someone wanted the village destroyed. She was right. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. In the 60s, that region of Sicily was controlled by 3 families. They were fighting over land rights, access to the coast, shipping routes. Small villages like San Salvatore di Fitalia were obstacles. Too proud, too traditional, too unwilling to pay protection money. So they killed everyone. They made it look like a natural disaster, paid off officials, buried the evidence under mud and rock. His voice was flat, emotionless, but I heard the rage underneath. Caterina's family, your family, they were casualties of a territorial dispute, and my grandmother testified against the men who did it, which is why she spent the rest of her life hiding. He looked at me then. Why she never told you about any of this. Why she sang that song quietly, only at night, only to people she trusted completely. She was protecting me. She was terrified. He stood, moved to the window. And she had every right to be. The Cosa family doesn't forget, doesn't forgive. Their father spent 18 years in prison because of her testimony. And when he got out, he spent every remaining day of his life looking for her. My stomach turned. Did he find her? No. She was careful. Changed her name twice. Moved 3 times. Never stayed anywhere long enough to leave a trail. He paused. She died of natural causes. Heart failure. Quick. Peaceful. How do you know that? The silence stretched too long. Dante, how do you know how my grandmother died? He turned to face me, and I saw the truth before he spoke it, because I had people watching her. For years. After Caterina died, I became obsessed. Tried to find anyone who knew her, anyone who could tell me about her life before me. I found immigration records, found Rosa's name, found the connection. The room tilted. You were spying on my grandmother? I was protecting her. His voice was tight. Once I knew she existed, I knew others would eventually figure it out too. So I made sure she was safe, made sure no one got close enough to hurt her. You had no right. I had every right. The words exploded from him. She was family, the only connection I had left to my wife. And I'll be damned if I let the Cosa family finish what they started 40 years ago. I stood, hands shaking. So this whole time, me working at that restaurant, living my life, you knew about me? No, I knew about Rosa. I didn't know she had a granddaughter until 3 years ago, when she died and you showed up at her funeral. He ran a hand through his hair. I had Marco do a background check, make sure you weren't in danger. And then I stayed away. Why? Because you were normal. The word came out like a confession. You had a regular life, friends, a job, no connection to any of this darkness. And I thought, he stopped, jaw working. I thought the kindest thing I could do was leave you alone. Until I sang that song. Until you sang that song in a restaurant where 3 Cosa soldiers were having dinner in the back room. His eyes met mine. They heard you, recognized it, called Luca immediately. And suddenly, you weren't safe anymore. The pieces fell together with sickening clarity. You weren't there by accident, I whispered. You were at the restaurant watching them. I was there because I'd heard they were planning something. A move against my operations. I wanted eyes on them. He moved closer, and then I heard you singing, and I knew they'd heard it too, knew what it meant. So I stayed. Made it obvious I was interested in you. Made them think you were important to me personally rather than just connected. You painted a target on my back. I painted a target on myself. His voice dropped. If they think you're mine, they can't touch you without starting a war. And the Cosa brothers aren't ready for that war yet. Yet. The word hung between us like a guillotine blade. My phone buzzed in my pocket, somehow still had battery despite everything. I pulled it out. Unknown number. Text message. Your protector is lying to you. Ask him what really happened to his wife's car. Ask him who benefits from your grandmother staying silent all those years. Ask him why he's keeping you so close. Elsie. Luca Cosa. My hands were numb as I held the screen toward Dante. What does he mean? Dante read the message, and something in his expression went cold. He's trying to turn you against me, then answer the questions. My voice was steadier than I felt. What really happened to Caterina's car? I told you. A bomb. Cosa, family revenge. And who benefits from my grandmother's silence? Everyone who didn't want those old crimes exposed. Who benefits? The silence was deafening. Dante. Who protected my grandmother for 40 years? Who made sure she stayed hidden, stayed safe? Stayed quiet about what she knew? My voice was shaking now. Who had the most to lose if she ever decided to testify again about what really happened in that village? His face was stone. Don't. Your family. The words tasted like poison. Your family controlled that territory in the 60s. Your family had the most to gain from destroying villages that wouldn't cooperate. My father. Your father's men killed my entire family. I was backing away now, seeing him clearly for the first time. And you've spent years making sure the only witness never talked. That's not... The apartment door exploded inward. The world became noise and motion. Men in black masks poured through the shattered door, 4, 5, 6 of them. Dante moved faster than thought, throwing me behind the couch as gunfire erupted. The sound was deafening, nothing like the movies. Just violence and chaos and the smell of gunpowder. I hit the floor hard, hands over my head, while bullets tore through expensive furniture and shattered glass rained down like deadly snow. Above me, I heard Dante returning fire-controlled bursts, each shot deliberate even in the chaos. Someone screamed. Not me. One of the attackers. Then Marco's voice from the hallway. Boss, fall back. Dante's hand found my arm, hauling me up. Move, now. We ran through smoke and destruction, my ears ringing, my vision blurred with fear. He pulled me into a hallway I hadn't known existed, narrow, dimly lit, the walls close enough to touch on both sides. A panic room. A safe route. An escape planned for exactly this moment. Behind us, the gunfire intensified. Ahead, a steel door. Dante punched in a code with bloody hands when had he been hit, and shoved me through into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on. We were in a stairwell, concrete and industrial. He slammed the door shut and threw 3 deadbolts. Where are the guards? I gasped. The men you said were protecting. Dead or bought off. His voice was cold fury. This was coordinated, professional. They knew exactly when to strike. The Cosa brothers. Or someone who wants me to think it was them. He pressed his hand against his side, and I saw blood seeping between his fingers. We need to move. This stairwell leads to the parking garage. Marco will have a car ready. You're bleeding. I'm aware. Let me see. We don't have time. But he swayed slightly, and I saw the pain crack through his control. I grabbed his arm, forced him to look at me. If you pass out, we're both dead. Show me. For a moment, I thought he'd refuse. Then he lifted his shirt, revealing a gash across his ribs, deep, bleeding freely, but not arterial. A graze from a bullet or shrapnel. It's not as bad as it looks, he said. It looks terrible. I pulled off my cardigan, pressed it against the wound. He hissed but didn't pull away. Our faces were inches apart in the dim light, both of us breathing hard, and I saw something in his eyes that made my chest ache. Fear. Not for himself. For me. Is it true? I whispered. What Luca said. About your family. My father did terrible things. His voice was raw. Built an empire on blood and fear and suffering. I inherited that empire. Those sins. That legacy. Did he destroy my grandmother's village? Yes. The truth hit like a physical blow. But I didn't know, he continued. Not until after Katerina died. Not until I started digging into her past and found connections that made me sick. By then, my father was already dead. Already beyond any justice. So you protected Rosa instead. I tried to make amends for crimes I didn't commit but benefited from anyway. His hand covered mine against the wound. I know that doesn't change anything. Doesn't bring back the people who died. But it's all I had. And now? My voice cracked. Now you're protecting me because I'm connected to your wife. Or because you feel guilty about what your family did. Or because I'm falling in love with you. The words came out broken, desperate. And I know that's insane. I know we've known each other for 2 days, and half of that you've spent hating me. But somewhere between that song and your anger and the way you refuse to break even, when everything's falling apart, I stopped being able to pretend this was just about guilt, or ghosts, or redemption. I stared at him. The confession hanging between us in the emergency lighting. That's the worst possible thing you could have said right now. I know. We're literally running for our lives. I'm aware. And your family destroyed mine. Yes. He leaned his forehead against mine. But I'm asking anyway. Asking for something I don't deserve. Asking you to trust me enough to survive the next few hours. And maybe if we're both still breathing when this is over, asking you to consider whether the son can be forgiven for the father's sins. Above us, an explosion. The building shook. They're breaching the safe room, he said grimly. They'll find the stairwell in minutes. He pulled away, started down the stairs with renewed urgency. I followed, my mind reeling, the cardigan pressed against his wound, slowly soaking through with blood. We burst into the parking garage 3 floors down. Marco was there, leaning against a black SUV, gun drawn. But something was wrong. His stance was too casual, his expression too calm. Dante stopped so fast I nearly crashed into him. Marco. The name came out flat. Tell me you didn't. Marco's smile was apologetic. Nothing personal, boss. But the Cosa brothers are offering twice what you pay. And they're promising protection when this territory inevitably changes hands. How long? 6 months. Since your wife died, really. Been patient. Waiting for the right moment. He raised his gun. Bringing the girl here was that moment. Made you vulnerable. Made you care about something other than the Empire. So this whole time, every safe house, every guard rotation, every movement you made. Marco shrugged. They knew it all. Behind us, footsteps on the stairs, heavy, multiple sets. Dante's hand found mine. When I move, you run. East exit. There's a subway station 2 blocks away. Get underground. Get lost. I'm not leaving. Run. He squeezed my hand once, hard. Then he pulled his gun and turned to face Marco. You always were too ambitious for your own good. And you always were too sentimental. Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. Goodbye, boss. The gunshot echoed through the concrete canyon. Dante moved. Not toward cover. Toward Marco. The bullet grazed his shoulder, but he didn't stop, just closed the distance in 3 strides and drove his fist into Marco's throat. The gun clattered to the concrete as Marco staggered back, choking. Run! Dante shouted at me. I couldn't. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Just watched as these 2 men who'd worked together for years tried to kill each other with brutal efficiency. Then the stairwell door exploded open, and armed men flooded into the garage. Dante grabbed Marco's gun, fired twice without looking, and 2 attackers dropped. Then his hand found my wrist and we were running across the garage, between concrete pillars, toward a red exit sign that seemed impossibly far away. Bullets sparked off metal and stone around us. My lungs burned. His grip on my wrist was iron, pulling me forward even as blood ran down his arm from the new wound. We crashed through the exit door into an alley that reeked of garbage and rain. The city noise hit like a wall traffic. Sirens. The distant pulse of music from clubs. Normal life. Continuing while ours disintegrated. Subways that way. Dante gasped, pointing. 2 blocks. Don't stop. Don't look back. What about you? I'm buying you time. He pressed something into my hand, a phone. Different from the one I'd had. There's 1 number programmed. A woman named Sophia. Call her when you're safe. She'll... No. I grabbed his jacket with my free hand. I'm not leaving you to die in an alley. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. I pulled him toward the street, toward people and lights and witnesses. And I'm choosing you. Now move. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Then we were running again, side by side this time, his blood leaving a trail on the wet pavement. We hit the main avenue and plunged into Friday night crowds, college kids bar hopping, couples holding hands, a street performer playing saxophone for change. I grabbed Dante's uninjured arm, wrapped it around my shoulders, made us look like a drunk couple stumbling home instead of what we were. You're insane, he breathed against my ear. I'm a Catalano. It runs in the family. Behind us, Marco and his men burst from the alley. But we were already disappearing into the crowd, just 2 more bodies in the crush of humanity. The subway entrance was a gaping mouth swallowing people whole. We descended into fluorescent lighting and the smell of metal and electricity. A train was pulling in, thank God. Thank God. We shoved through the closing doors and collapsed into seats at the back of the car. Dante's face was gray. Both wounds were bleeding freely now. Around us, late-night commuters studiously ignored us, the universal code of not getting involved. Next stop, I said quietly. We get off. Find a hospital. No hospitals. They'll check there first. Then what? You bleed out on the subway? There's a place. He fumbled with the phone he'd given me, pulled up an address. Brooklyn. Red Hook. An apartment above a pharmacy. Sophia will meet us. Who is she? Someone I trust. One of the few left, apparently. His laugh was bitter. Call her. Tell her we're coming. I made the call. The woman who answered didn't ask questions, just listened to the address of our current location, calculated travel time, and told me she'd have medical supplies ready. 20 minutes, I told Dante after hanging up. I can last 20 minutes. You better, because if you die after making me fall for you in 48 hours, I'll find a way to bring you back just so I can kill you myself. His eyes met mine. You're falling for me? Apparently I have terrible taste in men. Apparently. His hand found mine, squeezed weakly. For what it's worth, if I'd known you existed, if I'd known there was someone like you in the world, I would have burned my father's empire to the ground years ago. The train rocked through darkness, carrying us away from the life I'd known toward something I couldn't yet name. Tell me about her, I said quietly. Katerina, really. Not the tragedy, the person. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, she laughed at terrible jokes, cried during commercials, made the worst coffee I've ever tasted but got offended if I didn't drink it. His voice was soft, distant. She was terrified of thunderstorms but refused to admit it. Would just curl up close and pretend she was cold instead of scared. She sounds lovely. She was. He looked at me then. But she was also hiding. Always. I thought it was just shyness, or trauma from whatever she'd left behind in Sicily. I didn't realize she was protecting me from her past, from the truth about what she'd witnessed, from the guilt of surviving when everyone else died. She loved you. I know, and it killed her anyway. His grip on my hand tightened. Which is why I need you to understand something. When we get to Sophia's, when I'm patched up and we have a moment to think you can walk away, I'll give you money, documents, a new identity if you want it. Get you somewhere the Cosa family will never find you. And if I don't want to walk away, then you're choosing a life where people will always be trying to kill us, where trust is a luxury we can rarely afford, where every decision carries weight that would crush normal people. He held my gaze. I'm not the hero of this story. I'm the monster trying to be better, and I can't promise that's enough. The train screeched to a halt. Our stop. Good thing I'm not looking for a hero then, I said, standing and pulling him to his feet. Just someone honest enough to bleed. We emerged into Brooklyn rain, and I realized I'd stopped running from my grandmother's ghosts. Now I was running toward something else entirely. Sophia's apartment smelled like antiseptic and rosemary. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and hands that moved with surgical precision. She took one look at Dante's wounds, swore in Italian, and pointed me toward the bathroom. Clean yourself up, boil water, bring me towels. I obeyed without question, grateful for something to do besides watch him bleed. When I returned with supplies, she'd already cut away his shirt and was examining the wounds with clinical detachment. The shoulder's clean, through and through. The ribs are worse. Needs stitches, maybe 20. No hospitals, Dante said through gritted teeth. Obviously. She threaded a curved needle with practiced efficiency. You always were terrible at staying alive. Nice to see you too, Sophia. She worked in silence while I held his hand, feeling him tense with each stitch. His jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack, but he didn't make a sound. Who's the girl? Sophia asked, tying off the final stitch. Family. Katerina's niece. Sophia's hand stilled. I thought, so did I. Dante's eyes found mine. Turns out my wife had a twin sister, and this is her granddaughter, Madonna. Sophia crossed herself, then started bandaging. You're telling me this child is connected to the Catalano testimony? To the San Salvatore massacre? The Cosa brothers think so. Then she's as good as dead. Sophia looked at me with something like pity. Unless you're planning to start a war over her. Already started. Dante sat up slowly, wincing. Marco's been feeding them information for months. They knew about every safe house, every guard rotation. Tonight was supposed to end with both of us dead, and my territory carved up for distribution. But you're not dead. Not yet. He stood, testing his balance. Which means we have maybe 12 hours before they regroup and try again. I need to know who else has been compromised, who I can still trust. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to a cabinet, pulled out a laptop. I've been keeping records, tracking anomalies, things that didn't add up, shipments that went missing, meetings that got raided. I thought maybe you were losing your touch. I was losing my organization. She pulled up files, spreadsheets, surveillance photos, phone records. Based on this, you've lost about 40%. Marco was good. Built his network slowly. Convinced people you were weak. Distracted. That the Empire would be safer under Cosa control. I watched Dante's face as he absorbed this. Saw the betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. How many are still loyal? Truly loyal? Maybe 30 men. Sophia met his eyes. Not enough to hold territory. Not against what's coming. The silence was suffocating. Then Dante laughed sharp, bitter, breaking. My father built an empire over 40 years. I'm watching it crumble in 48 hours. Your father built an empire on fear, I said quietly. That's not the same as loyalty. He looked at me like I'd struck him. Rosa wrote about it. In the journal. I pulled it from my jacket pocket, somehow still there. Somehow still intact. Near the end. She said the difference between your father and the other families wasn't ruthlessness. It was that he made people believe they had no choice. That resistance meant death. Cooperation meant survival. But that's not loyalty. That's just prolonged captivity. And what would you suggest? His voice was raw. That I rebuild on trust and good intentions? This is the Mafia, not a charity. I'm suggesting you burn it all down. I moved closer, held his gaze. Everything your father built. Everything that's rotting from the inside. And then you build something different. Something that doesn't require people like my grandmother to run and hide for 40 years. That's naive. Maybe. But it's also the only way forward that doesn't end with you dying in an alley at 40. Sophia was watching us with interest. She's not wrong. You've been trying to reform from within for years. Pushing out the drug trade, cleaning up the gambling operations, reducing violence. But you're still operating within your father's framework. Still trapped by his rules. If I walk away, the Cosa brothers take everything. And they'll be worse than my father ever was. Then don't walk away. I grabbed his hand, made him look at me. Fight back, but not for territory or power or revenge. Fight for the people who actually need protecting. The waitresses and grandmothers and scared kids who get crushed when men like your father and the Cosa brothers go to war. You want me to become some kind of vigilante? I want you to become whatever version of yourself lets you sleep at night. I squeezed his hand. Katerina married you despite knowing what you were. My grandmother kept your father's secrets despite hating everything he stood for. Both of them made choices they thought would keep people safe. Maybe it's time we made different choices. Dante was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to Sophia. The 30 men who are still loyal. How many of them have families? Most of them. Why? Because I'm about to ask them to risk everything. And I need to know they understand what's at stake. He looked at me. You realize what you're suggesting means open war, blood in the streets, years of rebuilding, possible death for everyone involved. I know. And you're still asking me to do it? I'm asking you to choose. I moved close enough to feel his breath. Choose the empire or choose to be free. Choose your father's ghost or choose to live. Choose revenge or choose you. The word came out broken. I choose you. He kissed me then, desperate and gentle and tasting like blood and hope, and something that felt dangerously like a future. When we pulled apart, Sophia was smiling. Your wife would have liked her, she said quietly. I know. Dante rested his forehead against mine. Which is exactly why I can't let her die for my sins. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, we began planning a war. And somewhere in the silence, I found myself humming my grandmother's song not as a lullaby anymore, but as a promise. Some ghosts, I thought, are meant to be laid to rest. Others are meant to be avenged.